Let's start with the golden profile of OT foundation and visibility. As of today, ServiceNow already offers out-of-the-box integrations or service graph connectors with leading IDS solutions, and it is constantly working with many IDS partners to further expand this portfolio. These are some of the examples of service graph connectors available in ServiceNow Store. These connectors bring in the OT asset inventory and even alerts and incidents from IDS solution into ServiceNow. Once the connection is established, we configure identification and reconciliation rules. And this forms the foundation of ensuring deduplicated and accurate OT inventory in ServiceNow. We define the key identification criteria, which is basically the sequential checks needed to confidently identify and distinguish each asset. Once identification criteria is configured, we then configure the reconciliation criteria. In many implementations, we see multiple idea solutions in client's landscape, and this often leads to overlapping assets. For defining the reconciliation criteria, it is required to analyze the data from each IDS and then define the authoritative source for key attributes. This also involves looking at manual data upload plan and giving manual Excel upload and write reconciliation order in terms of key attributes that may come from it. So, for example, manufacturer or model number information is not accurately recorded in IDS, and this would be manually uploaded. And hence, for these attributes, manual upload must be the authoritative source. This can be defined in the reconciliation criteria. Once all these validations are implemented, ServiceNow's OT device register, yeah, and workspace dashboard reflects a highly accurate OT asset register. OT sites managers can access these dashboards to get a bird's eye view of the inventory, and they can also see if there is any status change. Beyond this inventory from IDS systems, they can also augment this asset data with additional information such as criticality, purdue level, or even warranty or service contract information. And then to ensure the high quality data standards are maintained, KPIs related to data completeness and quality can be monitored on the required frequency. This is where additional data management KPIs can also be configured, and the required frequency can be set for data collection and KPI reporting. In this view, the benchmarking across sites can be monitored, and this is useful for central or business area team. Now, once this foundational visibility of OT assets is established, it sets the stage for contextualization of all this information with the impact on manufacturing or production process and equipment. This is where we configure the ISA 95 process templates to define process hierarchies. ServiceNow also allows to map the upstream and downstream dependencies of each process area, which could give a complete picture of downstream impact of any OT disruption or change. Once this hierarchy is set up for the site, the next step is to map OT assets to process areas. This is where subnets or IP ranges can be defined per process area or work center. And then ServiceNow can auto map OT assets based on their IP addresses. Once the mapping is done, all these OT assets start showing up under the process area and also in the unified map. So now that the contextualization layer is ready, the next step is to define a clear operating model for the OT site teams. This typically involves two things: giving the right level of access to site personnel, which is done using RBAC in ServiceNow. And this configuration usually depends on site specific requirements. And second, from a task workflow perspective, we typically use two key groups in ServiceNow, which is managed by group and support group. Generally, we keep these aligned with the RBACs we defined. By doing all this, we get a contextualized view of OT assets, which includes high quality inventory of OT asset information built by homogenizing multiple sources. And it also tells us what manufacturing processes the OT asset supports and how critical that process is and how the governance and operating model across sites are working. Before I move on to the next solution tower, which is about how this golden profile optimizes incident response and change management workflows, just wanted to check if there are any questions. Okay, now our golden profile of assets is ready. All this information becomes critical while prioritizing and executing incident response. As I mentioned before, in addition to OT asset inventory, the service graph connectors also bring in incidents and any threats detected in the IDS system. And once these incidents are interfaced into ServiceNow, we can have site-specific or scenario-specific incident response playbook. For example, playbook variants can be defined based on criticality of the incident. These playbook can have detailed steps reflecting the incident response process of the site. It can have initial triage related steps where the classification and severity can be reviewed, and relevant solution or knowledge can be attached to assist site teams in responding faster. In case relevant knowledge does not exist, a knowledge gap can be reported, which can ensure that site-specific resolution steps can be captured into a central knowledge database so that it can be cross-leveraged across different sites facing similar incidents. As soon as an incident is assigned to a team, it starts reflecting in their dashboard. And with this dashboard, they get a quick view of their prioritized backlog. And with a dedicated workspace for incident response, they can get all relevant details they would need to strategize their response in a single screen. This can include relevant knowledge or guidance in case similar incidents were resolved in the company. It includes details on the impacted asset and its dependency, both from a network perspective as well as from the process impact perspective. This is where they can understand how critical the process is and its upstream and downstream dependencies. And if the response involves multiple steps which have to be performed by different teams, then incident tasks can be created and assigned to relevant teams. And with ServiceNow's low code, no code playbooks, these tasks and workflows can be auto generated based on type of incident or asset class or any other criteria. And then if the incident demands a more comprehensive response, for instance, if it has a exposed critical vulnerability that requires patching or applying service pack across all similar assets, then a broader change request can be created. This can have a well-defined playbook that can standardize and streamline the change management activities and approvals. Unlike IT, any change in OT landscape requires close alignment with equipment downtime, and ServiceNow allows configuring downtimes at the level of site, process areas, or even equipment. This can be manually defined or it can be imported from EAM or CMMS system. And the scheduling assistant highlights these downtimes and allows OT change owners to align the change execution with these downtimes. Now, this was how ServiceNow can accelerate incident response. Next, I would want to have a very quick overview of vulnerability response, but I'll take a pause here for any questions. Now, we spoke about streamlining incident response, but from a proactive risk mitigation standpoint, ServiceNow also allows configuring comprehensive risk scores and vulnerabilities remediation workflows. These are the VR integrations available within ServiceNow. And the way this works is similar to Service Graph Connector for RDS solutions that bring in asset inventory and incident data. ServiceNow also has out-of-the-box connectors to IDS to get vulnerability data. This is an example. Let me go to the next page. This is an example of the Clarity integration. The typical integration workflow involves ingestion of vulnerability items against assets from IDS solution. For the CVE, ServiceNow offers an integration to NIST's NVT database, which brings in new CVE detail risk rating exploits on a daily basis. This helps in creating a comprehensive vulnerability database in ServiceNow. Now, there may be thousands of OT asset vulnerabilities within a site, and to remediate them in a structured way, it requires a comprehensive risk scoring criteria which can help in prioritizing the remediation activities. This is where the contextualized layer in ServiceNow adds value. And for risk score calculation, not only can we incorporate parameters related to OT vulnerabilities that comes from idea solutions, but we can also include the process criticality aspects. And additional context can also be added that we now have in ServiceNow. Typically, OT asset criticality in IDS would only capture the network related criticality aspects. And this is where we can leverage the criticality of the manufacturing processes to rationalize the risk score. Let's say we have the same vulnerability across two PLCs with a similar network configuration, but one of them is in a critical process area. We may want to have a higher score for the for this PLC's vulnerability. This is the interface that allows us to configure that logic. Once the risk criteria is defined, each vulnerability will have a risk score and rating that clearly weighs in all the important parameters that site personnel consider while prioritizing vulnerabilities. Next, to get a view on the overall potential impact of vulnerabilities from the manufacturing process standpoint, we can configure risk roll-ups where again we can give the weightage based on whether we want to prioritize a high risk vulnerability even if there is just one in the process, or the overall count of vulnerabilities or average risk score. In this case, we are prioritizing high risk vulnerabilities. Based on this criteria, OT managers can have a 360-degree view of risk scores across each process that are within the site. And they can even compare the risks between sites from a benchmarking perspective. The vulnerabilities are assigned to the site-specific remediation group for carrying out the remediation. However, the remediation activities can be further accelerated by grouping together vulnerabilities. For example, activities can be grouped together based on production line or to align remediation with the scheduled downtime, or they can also be grouped together based on asset class or models, where common patching approach can accelerate remediation. With remediation tasks, the progress can be tracked at the aggregate level. For each vulnerable item, the platform also offers a single window view of all the details related to the vulnerability. ServiceNow also allows automatically importing CSAF advisories from vendors using their CSAF URLs. As such, solutions or mitigation guidance published by vendors can be imported to ServiceNow. It can provide detailed model-specific instructions for the site teams performing the resolution. These solutions get auto-attached to vulnerable items. And similar to incident response, vulnerability remediation can be aligned with process downtime, and any remediations that require a broader change can be directly connected to a change request. And that is the last thing that I wanted to cover for today's demo. Happy to take any questions.